Welcome back to the Lights Out Podcast, bedtime stories for boys and girls around the world. Good evening, boys and girls. Are you ready for bed? Are you all snuggled up and ready for another Lights Out bedtime story? Well, you're in for a treat tonight, because tonight's story is called How Big is the World by Britta Teckentrup. Now, have you ever thought about the size of the world and how big it really is? How big is the world? We'll find out in this book. It's amazing. I can't believe I just found it on my desk. And so a big shout out goes to all the awesome authors who are supporting the show's 1,000 ad-free stories forever for you boys and girls around the world. And of course, it wouldn't be the show without you guys. So thank you very much for subscribing and liking, thumbs upping and following wherever you are, especially on Spotify and Apple. Now, back to the story, because it's all about the story, and we're going to find out how big the world is by reading the book How Big is the World by Britta Teckentrup. Once upon a time. One morning, Little Mole woke up with a big question for his dad. "How big is the world?" asked Little Mole. "Why don't you go and find out?" replied Dad. So Little Mole popped out of his little molehill in the middle of a big field. "How big is the world?" asked Little Mole when he met a tiny spider. "As big as my web," the spider replied. "My web is the world. There isn't any more." And the spider crawled away to the end of her world. Little Mole came upon a mouse. "How big is the world?" he asked. "As big as my field," replied the mouse. "My field is the world." And the mouse scampered away to the end of his world. "How big is the world?" Little Mole asked a horse. "I happen to know that it is bigger than this field," replied the horse, as if he knew all about the world. "The world goes all the way to the sea. That is the end of the world," continued the horse, and then he trotted away. "How big is the world?" Little Mole asked a seagull. "As big as the ocean, I think," the seagull replied. "What is the ocean?" asked Little Mole. "It's all that water splashing about," said Seagull. "Come, I'll show you." They flew out over the ocean. Little Mole watched the world grow bigger and bigger. "What's that?" called Little Mole, shouting over the wind. "A whale," replied the Seagull. "Can we go and say hello?" asked Little Mole. "Hold on tight then," said the Seagull. "How big is the world?" asked Little Mole. "Massive," replied the enormous whale. "Jump on and I'll show you." They travelled north to where the ocean was so cold it had turned to ice. "Is the whole world so cold?" asked Little Mole, shivering. "I know warmer places," replied the whale, and the whale turned and swam south. The ocean was calm, the air was warm, and as the sun went down, the sky became red. "Where does the world end?" asked Little Mole. "End?" replied the enormous whale. "I have swum in this ocean all my life, and I have never seen the end." Soon, moonlight danced on the waves. "The world is beautiful, isn't it?" said Little Mole. "The more you look," replied the enormous whale, "the more you will see." They saw a vast desert, a tall city, huge mountains, wild jungles, colourful creatures, and thick forests. I miss my family, said Little Mole. Then it's time to take you home, said the enormous whale. Are we there yet? Asked Little Mole. Nearly, said the enormous whale. Look, Little Mole, there's a seagull. Little Mole thanked the enormous whale, and the seagull flew Little Mole all the way home. Little Mole popped down into his little molehill. It was very late and very quiet. Everyone was asleep except for Dad. How big is the world? Whispered Dad. As big as you want it to be, said Little Mole quietly, and he went to sleep. The end of the amazing story, How Big is the World by Britta Teckentrup. That's got to be one of my favourite stories at the moment. And boys and girls, how big is the world? That's right, it's as big as you want it to be. That's an amazing story with an amazing ending. The world is as big as you want it to be. Here on the Lights Out podcast, bedtime stories for boys and girls and adventurous moles all over the world. Good night.